Okay, what is up, y'all? How clothing is right-handed. Today's the 29th of April, 2026. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. This is our main side. Okay, one of the four sides to In the Image Clothing Company. What we do here is what our slogan is, allowing the body to work. The thing with clothing is it's the literal wording of anything physically placed on the body. We don't have to be thinking about fashion when we're discussing clothing. We, under In the Image Clothing Company, approach what we do more the way a physical therapist would. And that might not really make any sense without context, but there's your context. This clothing is the only thing physically placed on the human being. It's just the literal word of something placed on something else. And the reason why we're a clothing company, and have been since the founding, is for the human body's functioning. Because there's a lot of context I'll give, and I'll discuss what the video's title is here, how clothing is right-handed. We'll talk about a lot of things, at least, in modern day clothing designs, and things that don't matter on design, but just because we're right-handed, generally, as human beings, we're 85% plus, give or take, right-handed across the earth. Most all human beings are. And so what we do is discuss the anatomy of the human body in depth here under In the Image Clothing Company. We allow the body to work through all the things that we discuss, all the things that we do as a human being. Eating, speaking, standing, sleeping, walking, sitting, hydration, whatever else I did or didn't say that I maybe normally say when I discuss a lot of what we talk about here. The point is everything though, because we just have a body, and the body only does what it does. And God designed the body to work. Being designed in the image of God, we're a clothing company here under In the Image Clothing Company, to allow the body to work because of things like this. Joints of material of clothing needing to mesh with the joints of our body parts as close as we can. You know, we've got bones coming together and meeting, and at the same location, we need to have joints of material coming together and meeting. We've got things like shoelaces or drawstrings, which are just ropes tied on or around the body, and you can potentially twist the entire body by putting one side of a rope over the other side. And then we get into chronic patterning. So there's also a lot of things going on in modern day that are just imbalanced with clothing design, and through the technology we have nowadays, we've got things that are so universal across the earth, or so close to universal. Things are shipped across the whole planet in ways that are not possible without modern technology, with airplanes and just, you know, the ease and efficiency of shipping. We were wearing just about the same clothing designs in modern day as anyone across the entire earth. But like I'm saying, it doesn't matter the time period with a lot of these things. We are right-handed as human beings, generally at least. And the thing with this is there's two sides to our bodies. And on either side of the body, what's between either side? Well, a center. There truly is a centered line to the human being. It's not an approach on like some yoga class trying to get centered, but physically, mechanically, mathematically, there's only one way the human body could ever work. We've got even opposing musculature from the center line of the body. The center line of the body, well, these are some of the things there. The sternum, this bone in the front of the rib cage that the rib bones come into and connect. The rib bones wrap around the ribs cage, okay, well, they are the rib cage, wrapping around the lungs. The ribs connect into the spine and the rear of the body in the center. All those vertical little bones, the vertebrae stacking to support our bodies vertically. The spine, the trachea, this tube in our throat, the nose, the jaw. These are things in the center line of the body, and the jaw is a huge thing, stabilizing the entire body. We've got videos under In the Image Clothing Company's main site here discussing the jaw and a lot of them. But a video like the jaw is the shoulder under In the Image Clothing Company's main site here, the jaw is connected directly to the shoulder through musculature and tendons. It just goes from the corner of this lower jawbone called the mandible and down and out to the edge of the shoulders where these three bones meet to become the shoulder. look at the collar of my top move as I activate the musculature of my jaw. Okay. So this is what I'm saying. Keeping collars centered, the importance of snug collars. Those are 2 video titles under In The Image Clothing Company's main site here about collars around our neck on our top items of clothing. This is what I mean. Clothing is just a literal wording. So glasses, jewelry, hats, gloves, anything at all. We don't approach it through fashion under In The Image Clothing Company because the point isn't about clothing. The point is that clothing is the only thing physically placed onto the only thing that we have, which is our bodies. And there truly is just only one way the body could ever work. Bones connect to bones directly through ligaments, and they only can mesh just the way that the bones are shaped, and the length of the bones just determines how the body works. There's no other possible option for the body to work besides the only way that it can connect at the bones. And then we've got musculature that connects to these bones, and the musculature pulls on the bones, connecting to them through tendons, and it can only pull directly in line. So we've just got a neutral position to all the functioning in the body, where the bones track in line and the muscles only pull and only directly in line. And then from either side of the neutral, in all the functioning of the body, there's 2 sides to the neutral. We stabilize in the center or in the neutral, okay? And so the thing is, the human body only pulls. A video's title here under In The Image Clothing Company's main side, and the human body is just mechanics. A video's title here as well under In The Image Clothing Company's main side. The human being is just mechanical operations, just levers, hinges, rotations, functionality, and all the ways that it has it, residing in its neutral positions, and that's just how it is and what it is. There's only one way the human body could ever work. Being designed in the image of God, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, just unchanging always. Also called the truth. There's no changing to truth. There's no changing to God. There's no say we can have to change or decide truth as human beings. But what we do have is clothing designs. So we discussed this right-handed world that we live in because we've got products that are designed to be used with just the right hand over the left hand. If we've got a product that we're designing, and a big way we can see this is something like scissors, where scissors only work one way. You flip the scissors over and they're still working the same way. It's always the same on either side. In a right-handed pair of scissors, you have to actually purchase a specific left-handed pair of scissors for it to work well in your left hand. And there's so many products like this across the earth. Even the vehicles we have nowadays, they're right-handed in the ways they are, or right-footed, but that's just the right side of the body. And so I understand the surrounding sounds, but it's just another date-marked documentation under In The Image Clothing Company, in this case on the main side of one of our Fords to us. And yeah, it's the 29th of April 2026 here in St. George, Utah. I know my shirt says Moab, Utah, but we're down here in St. George where we're based. So not only do we live in a right-handed world, but clothing specifically is right-handed. The thing with the human body is it's got to be centered. There's no opinion to it. We've got opposing feet from the center line of the body, gripping arches inward. And as they oppose the center line, that's how we stay stable and vertical, standing up on Earth's vertical gravity pull. We've got a horizontal surface to the planet Earth, and then a vertical pull to the Earth's gravity. And this is a 90-degree angle, a perpendicular angle, a right angle, all the same wording. Well, all the same thing, worded differently is what I mean. So it's just mathematics. We have to stay standing up on Earth's surface with its vertical gravity pull meshing with the center line of our bodies. The body's musculature stabilizing and moving the body to just allow us to do something physically, motion as a human being. Only pulling. We've got muscles that pull to close, hinge joints, but then muscles on the opposing side pulling to extend the same hinge joint. We pull to close or we pull to open. Muscle fibers fire and come closer together with an electrical system sent from the brain. Signals go to the muscles to tell them to come together or contract. Muscles only pull. We don't push as a human being. We can only pull. And so why this can become a big problem when we're introducing things to the body, these things can become a problem, like clothing items, is because with the body only pulling and having a center line to it, and having to stay in that centered line just to stand up, we're either leaning left or we're leaning right, we're either leaning forward or we're leaning back. If we're not centered in between all of that, there's always a center. It's gravity. It's measurable degrees of hinges, levers, and rotations, and just mathematical operations of motion in the human being. It's just a mechanical machine placed onto this rock in space that is our Earth. So there's no opinion too, there's only one way the human body could ever work. Without changing the shape and length of the bones, they only connect how they do. But we do get into chronic patterning. And so we discuss a lot of this, how this stuff is created, these scar tissue problems in the body and bone spur problems when things aren't allowed to track in line, just the bones, the only way they're shaped and just meshing together, and then the muscles just pulling on those bones just directly in line from insertion at a tendon to insertion at a tendon. Muscles have to pull directly in line. That's all they could possibly do because that's the only way the bones can move with each other. So the body resides in its neutral positions. Like the wrist, it can come down, it can come up. Like the shoulder, it can come down, it can come up. Like the foot, it can go down or it can come up. Like the pelvis, it can tuck under us or away from us in a sense. And we discuss all this in much deeper explanation that I'm kind of brushing over here, but I'm just giving some context so that we can understand what I'm saying with this video's title, how clothing is right-handed. Because there's a lot of ways that it just is. And let's talk about this, okay? So what we have with our bodies is a body. Like I'm saying, even opposing musculature from the center line, the muscles connect into the center line. Muscles connect into the bone of the sternum in the center in the front of the body. Muscles connect into the bones of the spine in the rear of the body. And the muscles just connect to the centered line of the body. Leg muscles on the inside coming up and connecting into the center of the pelvis, pulling our legs in toward the center line of the body. These are adductor muscles. Muscles, also pull away from the body, called abductor muscles. But the point is, muscles connect to the center line of the body. To stay as vertical as we can, standing atop the Earth's surface with its vertical gravity pulled down on us, we have to stay centered. We have to come as close as we can to our centered line, is what I was saying, to be able to just stand up. The body works the best, the most contracted, the closest to its own center line, and the most vertical. So the thing is, if we're in a right-handed patterning, the right side of our bodies just isn't as close to the center line of our bodies as the left side of our bodies is. And what this creates is patterning through the entire body, where we've got rotations, like from the fingertips up to the elbow and these forearms. There's two bones, the radius and ulna, and they rotate over each other, bringing the thumbs inward. That's internal rotation, or taking the thumbs away from the body is external rotation. Just if we bend at the elbows here with the thumbs pointing up. And there's a neutral between just two sides of functioning. We straighten the arm by straightening the elbow between the hand and the shoulder. The hand essentially becomes the shoulder, and they just do the exact same thing as each other. And now we've got internal rotation or external rotation in the entire arms. This is the same in the legs, from the foot up to the knee. In the lower legs, there's a tibia and a fibula, like the radius and ulna in the forearm. There's internal rotation or external rotation from the neutral, which is the pinky toe straight forward with our different length toes as a human being. We've got different length 5 toes we roll evenly off the ends of just to share the weight. And then we straighten the knee between the foot and the hip, and we've got that same internal rotation or external rotation from that neutral pinky toe straight forward through the entire leg. So this is the problem, is if we're not evenly centered, contracted either side of the body, you know, from the centered line, the musculature connecting there, I mean, we're in a pattern then on one side of the body or the other. If one side's less contracted than the other side, just less activated at the musculature, working, pulling, supporting the body, then that side is just farther away from the body's center line, but both sides of the body connect to the same center. This vertical spine, for example, in the rear, and if one side gets pulled off to the side, the whole spine will twist. But the spine, connecting from the base of the skull back here, the base of the head, right, the skull, all the way down to the pelvis or the hip structure of the human being, yeah, it's connecting the legs to the head, to the shoulders, the ribs that are caging our lungs where we breathe, connecting to the spine. And so if we don't have even musculature opposing the centered line of just one of the chain of bones in the body, the spine, all those little bones stacking called vertebrae, then we are just imbalanced and our whole body gets affected down to the tips of our toes, up to the tip of our head, and out to the tips of our fingers, because the human body is all connected. It's a kinetic chain, meaning every bone connects to all the other bones and all the muscles connect to each other. And the ways that it has to happen, the body always goes where any of it goes. Anywhere any of the body goes, all of it comes. So if we affect any part of the body, the whole thing will get affected to some degree. And this is patterning. This is what we discussed getting out of here under In the Image Clothing Company, is chronic patterning. But not only can this just come if we never wore clothing, which would really be the fix of how clothing's affecting the body, is just to never wear it. Never place anything onto the body, just the literal word of clothing the body with something. If we never did that, there'd be no way something could alter the body that isn't physically placed on it, right? But clothing's essential. It's a need. It keeps us modest. It keeps us safe. It keeps us warm if it's cold outside. There's a lot of reasons we need clothing. Yeah, it's a commandment by God, too, to just stay covered up to the degree that He needs us to. The thing is, if clothing's not centered, your body can't be. We've just got gravity having the same effect on our clothing that it does on our bodies, and clothing is just always physically placed on our bodies if it is. That's what clothing is, something physically placed on us. And so if we've got a discrepancy or a difference or an imbalance anywhere in clothing, from left to right or from front to back at all, well, the body has to stay even in all of its rotations, internal versus external, the heights of both sides of it, the levels of contraction or activation of all the musculature in it. The body has left and it has right, it has front, it has back, it has internal, it has external, it has flexing and extending, it has all the motion that it has that we could discuss the body doing. And between all of either side of all of these motions the body has, there's a neutral position. And that's where the body just resides and stays, is in its neutral positions. Yikes. Truly. Okay, there's only one way the human body could ever work, but when we're deeply ingrained into patterning, we don't understand this if we don't. I know I didn't until I did. Until I was about 24 years old, around the time I founded In the Image Clothing Company. Yeah. Me, Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. Yeah, I don't have a claim on it, and we discuss it in such depth, there's no possible dispute to the truth of it because it's not my choice. It's been the same for every body who has one and everyone who has a body. Within this universal human design, there's only one way it works. We can have differences slightly within the universal human design, you know, or quite different bodies too, deformities, amputations, birth defects, major surgeries. These can be some relatively major differences, but only different from something, which is the universal human design. So this is what I'm saying, you know, as the founder of In the Image Clothing Company, this is what we do. We get as close as we can to the universal human design. We get out of chronic patterning within our own individualistic situations to the degree that we can to allow our bodies to work. And not only, like I'm saying, could we just get into a right-handed patterning from anything ever, just using the right side of our bodies more than the left? Well, the musculature will just be able to work better on the right side than it will on the left side, because it's in practice, if you will, of being used. You know, if you're right hand dominant and you use your right hand for just about everything, like the majority of human beings across the planet, it's something you can do well with your right hand. If you try to do it with your left hand, it's just hard. And so all the little fine motor skills that go into this, and all of the dexterity, meaning just a little motion in the hands, using your left hand versus your right hand, it's different. The strength you have in certain positions in the left side of your body versus the right side of your body is just different if we're dominant with one side of our bodies. And so, yeah, an imbalance can get created in the body just because we're not using both sides of our bodies evenly regardless. But this is still the intro to this video's title, just to give some real good context on why this is a thing and how this is a thing, and always. And how you don't have to even care to want to try to care in the slightest bit about clothing, but you have to be extremely intentional about whatever you place onto your body if your body is going to continue to work. And that's what we do under In The Image Clothing Company. We're only about clothing, and have been since the founding, just for the sake of allowing the body to work. Because we can really, really restrict and alter the way the human being works by having something physically placed on it all day, clothing it. So how clothing is right-handed, that's this video's title. Well, at the very baseline understanding, or the most obvious, some of the most obvious understandings of this can be seen in knots. You know, we discussed shoelaces and drawstrings as some of the two biggest things, a rope around the feet and the ankles to hold shoes on, or a rope around the waist to hold pants on. That's all these things are, just ropes. But it could be anything that's a rope anywhere on the body at all. But if we tie a right-handed knot, which is usually worded right-handed with the left side over the right, so we use our right hand to do the majority of the work with tying the knot, or if we tie a right-handed knot, which would usually be the right side over the left, a left-handed knot, right? Yes, would be the right side over the left, usually is what you would call a left-handed knot, because then you're using the left hand to do the majority of the work of tying the knot, with your left hand being dominant if you're left-handed, right? But being right-handed in this right-handed world is the case for most everyone. 85% or more of human beings in modern 2026 are right-handed. Okay, today's the 29th of April, 2026. How clothing is right-handed. This video's title under In The Image Clothing Company's main side. Well, that's a big point. If you tie a knot and you put one side over the other, you're just rotating the entire body. The height of the rope difference from left to right, but also just the twist that's happening as pressure is put against the knot. You're twisting the entire body. If there's something in the center of the body in a knot, like a drawstring around the waist, you notice this necklace I have on, this is just two ropes. And on one side of the rope, I did a left-handed knot, and I went around the other side of the rope and I did a right-handed knot. There's a video here under In The Image Clothing Company's main side titled Left-Handed Knots versus Right-Handed Knots. And essentially, we need to tie right-handed knots on our left side and left-handed knots on our right side in things like shoelaces. When we've got two sides to the body, we tie them over toward the center line of the body, because then we're evenly opposing the center line of the body. We have to. We're just tying, like I'm saying, the height of one rope on top of the height of the other rope. Or if it's the same rope wrapping around the body, the height of one side of the rope is just the rope's height higher than the height of the other side of the rope. And this travels up through the entire body, or down through the entire body, to the tip of the head, the tips of the fingers, and the tips of the toes, just all the extremities, with a rotation in the body. And so what happens is, this is just a rope. And then, well, this is just a rope right here. Dante's homemade slip lead. My current standard poodle here, he's in this video to the degree that he is. Yeah, over on In The Image Clothing Company Poodles, we specialize in purebred standard size poodles, but we give information that applies to all dogs on what we title letting dogs stay natural. We do the same thing we do here under In The Image Clothing Company's main side, but things like collars, leashes, harnesses, bandanas, slip leads, these are essentially clothing the dog with something, right? It's just the literal wording of something placed on something else. God clothes the fields with grass. It's just literal wording. So anyway, though, ropes, yeah, placed on the body, it's just a rope, you know. So that's one of the most obvious ways we can see it. Once we start discussing this, it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I mean, you just try it with your arms. Take one arm and place it on top of your other arm, and it's not only your arms at where you've placed them on top of each other, like at the forearms, let's say, between the wrist and the elbow. It's not only this location that's higher on one side than the other, but now all the way up to my shoulders. One shoulder is higher than the other because it just travels through the entire body. And this is happening with just the thickness of a rope. On one side of the rope being higher than the other side of the rope, the entire side of the body that the rope is higher on will be that much higher, and the entire side of the body that the rope is lower on will be that much lower than the other side. Okay. I get the airplane noise and just, you know, the pickleball playing behind me and all the surrounding sounds of the cars and whatever it is, but the information's been documented, it's date marked, it's just what it is, you know, it's valid, it's here to show congruency, and also it's just able to be perceived. Even if it's relatively hard to hear me in this, you can hear it. I'm certain you can. So, yeah, and if not, read my lips, seriously, okay? No joke, I just mean it because it's just about documenting the information. That's the point of the videos, the way that we're doing them around this time period, and why we're doing what we're doing here under In The Image Clothing Company. So, we've got ropes, and if you're right-handed, you're probably tying the left side of a rope over the right in what we would call a right-handed knot. Well, this will twist the entire body, and this is clothing becoming right-handed through a rope or through a knot. But there's so much more to this that would never have to be anything like tying a knot, and things that are not even conditional to any kind of clothing design at all. Like I'm saying, even opposing musculature from the center line of the body connects into the center line of the body. And if it's not allowed to just stay even, because our clothing is not evenly sitting on our bodies, this is clothing being right-handed. If our top is not sitting, as we discussed under In The Image Clothing Company, like a cage for our shoulders, our tops need to be essentially locking our shoulders in place right at the edges of the shoulder. The edge seams to our tops, where we've got material meshing at like the torso of the body with the material of the sleeve of the body on the arm, okay? When it comes to our clothing items, if the seams aren't evenly right at the very edges of our shoulders, where we've got these three bones, the collarbone called clavicle, the shoulder blade called scapula, and the upper arm bone called humerus, meeting to become the shoulder joint, we need the seam of our clothing item as close as we can get right to the very edge of the shoulder, because that's where the bones meet. But it needs to be even on either side. And how clothing is right-handed through something like this is clothing not staying centered is going to just move off to the side you're using. Like my top here being nice and centered, if I reach off to the right side to do something, I'm just taking my entire body off to the right side. I'm elongating the musculature on my right side more than the musculature on my left side is, and the clothing is just encapsulating my body, or your body, or whoever's body it is. This applies to everybody, literal wording, right? The literal wording of clothing the body with anything. If it's not evenly placed opposing the center line of the spine at the shoulders, then, well, if it's farther off to the right side than it is on the left side, we've got clothing being right-handed. So our clothing just is placed on us always. It's determining where our bodies go. And clothing can have give in its material. Really, our clothing needs to do at least these three things. Stay centered, because there's a center line to the body. Fit correct, because, well, there's locations where the seams meet with the joints of the body, or the joints of the clothing meet with the seams of the body. Okay? Joints of material and joints of clothing need to mesh. But then also, being made in all the ways we can from 100% natural materials. There's just no opinion to natural. The human body's only natural. We're literally only the earth. That's what the body is. We eat plants that grow from the earth, or we eat animals that eat plants that grow from the earth. The earth literally becomes the human being, and once we die, we just decompose back to the earth. Matter cannot be created or destroyed. It's a universal law. It's God's truth. Okay, so we've got unnatural, synthetic, artificial, synonyms with fake like this. Material we make as human beings, and just a lot of things we make in our food and all of these things we could possibly discuss in modern day, inventions of human beings. And this is why the goal is natural on all four sides of In the Image Clothing Company, because there's no possible opinion to natural. The only way the body could ever possibly work is naturally, neutrally, normally. These synonyms with how the human being functions is just a mechanical machine, and it's literally just earth. And when we place clothing onto our bodies, it needs to be natural materials in all the ways we can possibly have it be, because that's the only thing that would ever be possible to have until human beings unnaturally make things that are fake. Okay, it's just new things, recent past from today's date, the 29th of April 2026, that these things are even possible. You know, things like stretch in clothing comes with unnatural materials. The human body only pulls. Muscles only pull together, even in what seems like a push. We're just pulling muscles to extend a hinge, opposing pulling muscles to close a hinge. It's just what it is. The body's just mechanics. And, you know, even if clothing doesn't have stretch in it, which, you know, we can't have stretch in our clothing and have our bodies work. It's not going to be able to possibly happen. But even clothing that doesn't have stretch, like this shirt that I'm wearing here, it's 100% cotton. Plant material, okay? It's just natural. The clothing item still has give to it. What clothing is, if it's, you know, like this, material woven together, is just that. A lot of little strands of fibers woven over each other. And as we wear this clothing, we can wear this clothing. You know, the clothing can get worn out, but just meaning worn in, even, if you will. As we wear the clothing, the strands of little fibers of material that are woven together can separate a little bit. And if we're using one side of our bodies almost always, as we're doing this, anywhere our bodies go, our clothing is going, right? Gravity's having the same effect on our clothing that it's having on our bodies, and the clothing is just physically placed on us, encapsulating our bodies. We're holding our clothing up off of Earth's gravity all day, and as we move our bodies, we move our clothing. So if you're right hand dominant, and you're basically always using only your right hand for just about everything in life, what'll happen is, even in clothing that doesn't have any stretch to it, is the clothing will move just off to one side of the body. As we move this side of the body, we're just moving the clothing. We're just wearing friction and motion into the fibers of the strands woven together of the clothing. On one side of our bodies more than the other. And so now, with us still having musculature connecting the edge of the shoulder into the center line of the body, on either side, having to stay centered, the length of the muscles won't change, and the length of the bones won't change. The bones connect directly to each other through ligaments, and the muscles connect to the bones directly through tendons to stabilize and move the bones. The bones always come first of the body, and they have to stay just in an even position opposing the center line. Otherwise, they're not. And like I was saying earlier, let's say one shoulder is farther away from the center than the other shoulder. Well, the center, in this case, is the spine. And so now our vertical support with Earth's vertical gravity pull, which is the spine, all these little bones stacking to have all this motion in our back, isn't centered anymore. But Earth's vertical gravity pull is still centered. We still have the same things on both sides of our bodies, musculature and bones just connecting to the center. But what happens is if our clothing gets worn off to the right side of our bodies, worn in or worn out, but stretched in the material's fibers weave tightness, or just like I'm saying, let's say there's no stretch, because we can never have stretch in our clothing and have our bodies work. It's impossible mechanically. The body only pulls together, and stretch in clothing pulls away. It's physically impossible for our bodies to function within stretchy clothing. Physically impossible, no possible opinion to that. And stretch in clothing just didn't even exist until just decades ago, just tens of years ago from today's date, the 29th of April, 2026. So, yeah, there's no possible opinion to it. You can never have stretch in your clothing and have your body physically function. All the body is a machine of motion, a mechanical machine, something that has functionality. Hinges, levers, and operations through rotation is just mechanics. That's all the human body is. And the only way it can possibly move is by the muscles pulling together. Okay, so we can never, and a third, never have stretch in our clothing. It can't possibly allow the body to even function. You're sweating because you're overworking your body, you're dehydrated, you're imbalanced because your musculature is just fighting against stretch that's going the opposite way of the way your muscles are pulling. Yeah, it's impossible physically for your body to work within stretch, or my body, any body. It's literal wording. Yeah, it's literal wording. Stretch versus contraction. It's just two opposite ends of things. Muscles only contract if clothing has stretch. Well, it's the opposite way. But let's say there's no stretch, the muscle fibers, they'll get stretched out or pulled away from, or just worn out, okay, worn apart. All the little workings in the muscles, the little fibers that connect and integrate, if you will, to have the muscle be what it is. That's how there's motion in the muscle, and yeah, mobility, and muscles are pliable is because there's a lot of little strands of fibers of flesh woven together, like our clothing. And so if our clothing fibers or strands that are woven together get a little bit worn apart, more on one side than on the other side of the body, because we're just reaching with our right arm, let's say, the whole right side of the rear of our clothing item is being pulled forward with our bodies coming forward. As our arm reaches forward, our scapula wraps around our rib cage, that big bone on the upper back, right? There's one on either side, the scapula or the shoulder blade. It's one of the three bones of the shoulder. And as we reach forward, this bone moves around the rib cage or the rib bones. But as it's doing this, it's bringing the clothing with it. And as the clothing just moves and then comes back and moves and comes back, it's getting a little bit worn just because there's motion happening in it from its tightly woven original design when the clothing was made. And all those little fibers get woven together tightly like this to create this sheet, if you will, of fabric, okay, that is our clothing. Whatever it's made out of, just like the body's muscle tissue. It's made out of little strands of muscle fibers woven together, essentially. Now you have one muscle piece, okay, one muscle. But like we have one t-shirt made up of a lot of little strands of fibers. We have one muscle made up of a lot of little strands of fibers. But, our body is alive, and it doesn't wear away from itself and loosen these fibrous strands connection as we move our bodies. Our clothing items do, though. loosen the strands of the fibers weave together, and then they don't sit as closely anymore as they get worn away. They're not going to come back the way that the body, with being living tissue, you know, is really resilient. Clothing, if you pull on it and it gets really pulled apart, it might never go back, you know, even close to where it was before. If I really stretch the little strands and fibers of the cotton woven together in this shirt by just grabbing this shirt and just pulling on it, you know, away from itself, it might never go back to where it was before. And now, if this is happening on the right side of our bodies, like on the rear of our tops, from the center line of our spine and the rear of the body out to the edge of the shoulder, the whole rear of the clothing item is moving as the whole rear of our bodies, which in this case is that scapula bone, is moving. I mean, you can see just how much motion is in my shoulder as I reach forward here. That's my clothing too moving. That's my clothing moving as well. Look at my clothing move just as I reach my arm forward, right? Put my finger here where there's this line on the t-shirt design. And as I just reach my arm forward, so much motion is happening in the clothing. And so this is how clothing is right-handed. This is this video's title. This is one of the big ways. Under In The Image Clothing Company's main side here, right? The 29th of April 2026. How clothing is right-handed. Well, there you go. If we are just having more motion happening in one side of our bodies almost always than the other side, we're also having more motion happening in that side of our body's clothing item almost always than the other side. And so now our tops needing to stay right at the edges of our shoulders evenly, being like a cage for the shoulders. That's how I describe it, because, well, we've got a rib cage. It's just nicely evenly sitting around the lungs, which is how we're breathing, right? These balloons, in a sense, that allow air to rush into our bodies when we expand and open this void space for an exchange of gases to happen. Clothing cages our shoulders, okay? It just needs to nicely sit at the edges of our shoulders, and it just won't evenly if we wear the fibers of the material that's woven together to become the clothing a little bit farther apart on one side, just because we're using one side so much more, and as we do, it's just stretching farther away. Not stretch, but it's, you know, wearing farther away from itself, you know, from its original tightly woven design of clothing. You know, there's no clothing until we make it as human beings. But this will happen with something even like leather, you know, like animal hide. It's the same thing, just things in general. As they move, they can kind of separate a little bit. Like I'm saying, the fibers of our bodies, the musculature, it's the same type of thing. It's just woven together, but the body is living tissue, and so it's really resilient, and it heals itself, and it's always, you know, activated. It's got blood pumping through it, and it's healing itself. But if we have an animal be killed and we use its skin as clothing, now that skin isn't alive anymore to repair any kind of like pull or wear on the fibers of the skin or the musculature or the flesh of the animal. And so even something like leather, as tough as leather is, you know, skin of like a cow, for example, that you could use to make clothing with, you know, as opposed to plant material like cotton, like this shirt here is, this necklace that I'm wearing, and this hat. Whatever it is at all, things wear, you know, things start to get farther away from where they once were naturally sitting as they just have motion in them. But the thing is, we're right hand dominant, if we are, or let's say you're left hand dominant, then there you go. But this is one of those things that's, it's not conditional to any kind of design ever, because you could have entirely centered clothing design and you could make it out of just about any kind of material ever, but the material has to move to some degree if we're making clothing with it, because our bodies move, and so our bodies have to be able to move within our clothing, or else there's no reason to put clothing on the body, because the body wouldn't be able to work. if the clothing couldn't move, we would just not be able to move either, and that's why we have a body, is for it to move. So basically, no matter what you could ever possibly make clothing out of, it's still going to have some give to it. It's still going to wear to a degree over time and separate a little bit at the fibers of whatever it is. Even if it was all one thing somehow and not fibrous, it would still, over time, just move in the ways that it would have to, just because that's what it's doing, is moving. And as it does, what I'm saying is it'll not be as tightly together over time. Okay, so there you go. One of the ways that clothing is right-handed, well, that's something that's only going to be the case if you're right-handed. In this case of a centered clothing item, but your clothing will become left-handed if you're left-handed. In a clothing item that's actually centered, but you're just wearing the fabric over time, using just one side more than the other side, because now it's just sitting on your body with Earth's gravity just hanging it there. And if you've worn one side to sit on your body wider or more worn away from its original weave tightness than the other side, now it's just not centered anymore, right? And so your body won't be either. It's just gravity. I mean, that's a big point. We just discussed gravity so much under In the Image Clothing Company. Yeah, I mean, that's so much of what we're dealing with, is just staying vertical over Earth's gravity as a human being, just on these two little feet, just the lever of the foot off the hinge of the ankle, and even mathematical opposing bends in the body from top to bottom, really from bottom to top, to stay vertical, meshing with Earth's vertical gravity pull. The ankles bend backward, the knees bend forward, the hips bend backward, the low back bends forward, the mid back bends backward, the upper back, which is just the neck or the cervical spine, it bends forward. So it's just back and forth and back and forth and back and forth up the body, evenly mathematically opposing the vertical pull to gravity just to stay standing up. And so anyway, if anything is affecting gravity's pull on our bodies, like clothing just not staying centered on our bodies will be really affected. And so if we've got clothing that's just sitting wider, if you will, on the right side, it's just worn more in the material on the right side because we're just using our right side more. And as we're just moving and moving and moving. The clothing fabrics weave back and forth, up and down, all around that we're moving it. And it's just separating at the actual fibers of the clothing items, level. Like small little strands of fibers are actually just coming farther apart on just our right side if you're right-handed, and just your left side if you're left-handed. But living in this vast majority right-handed world, right? Now what you do ever in your life, your clothing item's not sitting on you centered, and so your body couldn't possibly stay centered either. It couldn't possibly. It's because of gravity, if nothing else. And it's just what it is. We can discuss it in depth, on all the ways that that's not allowing the body to stay centered. But that's one of the ways that clothing is right-handed. And we just discuss things in depth where we do under In the Image Clothing Company, like in depth. But this will happen in a top like that, right, where your shoulder's moving. You're just gonna wear the clothing to where the edge seams aren't sitting evenly at the edges of our shoulders. If we're almost always only moving just one side of our bodies, there you go. In pants, it's the same kind of thing. If you're just bending your right knee more than your left knee, if you maybe bend forward, like with one leg forward, and it's your right leg, and your knee puts pressure against the front of your pant leg on the right side more than it just about ever would happen on your left side, then your knee's not going to be evenly against the material of the inside of your pant leg on the right side as it is on the left. It just isn't. You just wear the material of the pants, and it just sits on your body differently, and then your body is into a different kind of patterning. There's more play and more motion in the knee area of the pants for your knee to come forward more, or for your knee to go outside away from your body more, when the strands of the fibers of the weave of the clothing item just get stretched away from each other. No stretch ever in clothing. It's impossible for the body to work within stretchy clothing. No opinion, eternal permanent information, not my choice. But, you know, I get the airplane noise. Let me wait for the airplane noise for just a little bit here. It's truly impossible for the body to work within stretch in clothing. But, you know, just the material wearing like that is going to just cause it to wear away from itself. So even me sitting like this with my elbow joints on my knee joints here, if I were to just always be doing this with only one arm on my one knee, like if I just always only sat with my right arm on my right knee, I would wear the material of my pant leg just over time, and the fibers would stretch out and stretch out and stretch out and stretch out away from each other. Not stretch, right, but just come apart more. And now there's more motion for my knee. Instead of having my knee just in place nicely, musculature activating to pull my knee in, adduction, musculature activating to pull my leg out, abduction, musculature activating to pull my knee forward, flexion, or musculature activating to extend my knee back behind me, which would be extension. Yeah. You know, this will be imbalanced if the pant leg's not just sitting evenly around my knee joint, but my entire leg. This is what I'm saying with the tops sitting evenly at the shoulders. Well, it's the same thing if we're discussing sleeves sitting evenly around the elbow joints, you know, long sleeves. If we just wear the material and so there's just more room there, then we don't have just this even activation of musculature. But if we wear clothing fibers away from each other, then the leg will go more on that side, just have more motion there than it could on the other side, because we've worn the material. You know, at the really small level of the actual fibers of the strands of whatever it is woven together to make the clothing, ideally 100% natural materials in all the ways we can, they'll just get pulled apart a little bit. And now there's more motion, but only in the locations where it's pulled apart a little bit. Because unless we're entirely centered in our lives with all the motion we do as human beings, we're going to wear imbalances into our clothing. And then we have clothing being right-handed. If we've worn the right side of our clothing more than the left side, and the vast majority of human beings are right-handed in 2026. Okay. Current, present day, 29th of April, in the Image Clothing Company's main side. How clothing is right-handed, right? And so this is what I'm saying. These are things that are not conditional, because no matter what you make clothing out of, if it has the ability to be worn, you know, like separated slightly at the fibers of the weave, and it would have to, no matter what it is, because it has to be able to be pliable enough to move. Well, it would basically have to, right? But seen with context, the body's got to continue to move. And so, you know, this will happen no matter what you ever make clothing out of. If we just use one side of our bodies more than the other side of our bodies within the clothing, the side of our bodies that gets used the most, that side of the clothing will just not fit the body as properly. And then that plays into deepening the patterning the body might already be getting into. Okay, a right-handed patterning if you're right-handed. So that's how clothing is right-handed, like that. But this is the thing, is if you are right-handed and you just are coming to a chair or onto the ground or somewhere to sit down, You might have something in your right hand and you bring it with you and you come from the left to the right of the chair. And as you do this, maybe you sit down and the pants you're wearing rotate underneath you, like underneath your glutes, the glute muscles, your ischiums, your pelvis, your sit bones, right at the bottom of your hips where you sit down. Let's say your pants rotate left underneath you because you slide right as you sit down. Now you're wearing the fibers of your pants into a right-handed pattern and it's imbalanced. This is how clothing becomes right-handed, regardless, unconditional about what it's made out of or if it was entirely centered to begin with the clothing design. We just wear the fibers of the clothing. If you sit down and slide to the right a little bit as you do it, you know, like getting into a vehicle, if you're sitting on the left side of it, you sit down into the vehicle and you kind of slide right as you do it, you know, from left to right, you're just wearing your pants into a right-handed patterning. And as you sit there with just your body's weight on the fibers of your clothing, it wears your clothing into a right-handed patterning. And just as you do that, slide if you do, don't is the point, right? Sit down very centered. There's two sides to the body. But if you do slide as you sit down, like sit down and slide to the right, yeah, you're just wearing your clothing material into a patterning. And then now the rest of the entire time you have that clothing item on your body, that patterning is playing into how your body works and not allowing your body to. The body only works centered. That's just how it is. I mean, you can only speak if your jaw can just hinge up and down, centered, you know, as one of the things. I mean, it's just only what it is. Yeah. We've got the jaw stabilizing the entire body. Eating, speaking, breathing, and yes, stabilizing the entire body is what the jaw does. At least those roles for the whole body, you know. But everything plays into the jaw. Everything plays into the hands and feet. Everything plays into the entire body. Everything plays into what's in the direct center, like the spine. And then the spine will play into the entire body. You know, with the way that it can all work, if anything's altered in it, it'll travel through the rest of it. And we just wear our clothing into a right-handed patterning if we're right-handed. So things like this are things that are entirely unconditional. Let's say we've got entirely centered tops, you know, clothing items that go like on our shoulders, around our ribs, you know, top items, okay, on our torso. You're using your right hand more than your left, and you're just moving your right shoulder. You're wearing the right side of your clothing. It's not gonna fit as snug on your body. Now your body will be off to the right more. Now you're just in a right-handed patterning in your body. That's a problem, okay? You'll become more externally rotated on the right side of the body. The body will drop lower and just be farther away from the body's center line. But this is all the same thing as just clothing not fitting as snug on the right side. Gravity just pulls it down and off to your right side. It's just the same exact thing as the body being in a right-handed patterning. Clothing being in a right-handed patterning, it's just the only thing physically placed on. It's just the literal word of clothing the human being with anything. This is in the Image Clothing Company. And this is one of the ways that clothing is right-handed, right? How clothing is right-handed. 29th of April, 2026, today's date, okay? In the Image Clothing Company's main side. But there's your top item, okay? In one of the ways. And we discussed the elbows because, yeah, I mean, if you're just bending your arm at the elbow and your elbow is putting pressure into your long sleeves material that's surrounding your elbow joint, you're just going to wear the fibers of the material of your elbow clothing, okay, more on your right side than you do on your left side if you move your right elbow more. You're just going to wear all the little fibers that are making up the material sleeve around the elbow of the clothing more on the right side. And then now the even extension, you hear all this clicking and popping in my body? Yikes. There you go, getting out of chronic patterning. As the founder of In The Image Clothing Company, leading this for my entire lifetime, Evan Strong. Watch the journey. You couldn't possibly dispute the information we give here. We discuss it in such depth, there's no denying what's going on. Just the truth of why the human body isn't allowed to work in modern day. God designed the human being to work, just like all the animals. They work. If they do. I mean, animals don't do workout routines or stretching routines to try to get their body to do something. That's physically impossible without changing the shape and length of the bones, the way they connect, and the way that the muscles connect to them to stabilize and move them. It's the same with the human being. You can gain all the muscle mass, muscle size, hypertrophy you want, or muscle strength that you want by excessively working your body. But once you stop trying to get excessive muscle in your body, it always goes back to normal. The human body's only normal. And it's like this, the normal amount of contraction versus elongation in musculature on either side of the body from the center line, from the neutral positions. The normal heart rate the body has, the normal respiratory rate, the amount the heart beats or the lungs breathe per minute, the normal body temperature, 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, always. The normal amount of fat content versus muscle mass to just have a healthy balance. The normal amount of water in the body to lubricate the body, and the normal amount of food in the body to fuel the body, just to keep the body regulated. There's only a normal to the human being. And anyway, yeah, clothing, it's right-handed, and then it's placed onto our bodies. And so that's what I'm saying is, at the shoulder edge, our clothing can get worn off to the right side more, fitting looser on our right side, and our bodies are in a right-handed patterning. At the elbow joint, clothing that's long-sleeved, down on our elbows can get worn so that our elbows don't have even extension from left to right. But if our clothing is just always fitting looser on our elbow on the right side because the material has been worn, so it's not fitting as snug on the right side, then we might just not ever really get full extension of the right elbow because the clothing is just not fitting snugly around the right elbow. So as we reach forward evenly with our arms, the right elbow maybe can't straighten as much as the left because there's just bagginess and looseness in the material surrounding the whole entire right arm where it has been worn into a right-handed patterning just by using the right side of our body so much more than the left. If we're right-hand dominant, living in this right-handed world, and there you go. How clothing is right-handed, that's some of the ways. Okay. So yeah, this is happening under our sit bones, the ischiums, the bottom of the pelvis where we sit down, the bottom of our hips, where our glute muscles are, where I'm sitting on the grass right now. If you just put more weight on the right side of your body because your body's just off to its right side in a right-handed patterning, you're just putting more pressure on the material of the right side of your pants rear from the centered line of the body than you are on the left side, and you're just wearing your body's pants. Well, yeah, the pants your body is wearing is being worn into a looser fit on the right side in the glute area, and the glutes are muscles. We've got the hamstrings coming up. From the knee joint. Okay. Those big muscles on the rear of the upper legs, those hamstrings, they come up from the rear of the knee joint and then up and connect to the pelvis, right where the glutes are. And then the glute muscles, the glute max, minimus, and medius, and all the glute muscles, all those muscles just around the rear of the hips that allow motion and stability in the hips is the point. We're sitting on that area, and if there's more weight on just one side of our bodies just because we're in a right-handed patterning, we just wear the right rear of our pants fibers, strands more, and now the hips are imbalanced. This is how clothing is right-handed through another way that's just unconditional, just because even if your pants are centered at the design, stitching, and fit to begin with, over time you just wear the fibers more on the right side than the left, and there you go, your body's just getting into a deeper right-handed patterning because of your pants. Okay. So we talked about the knee joint, you know, I mean, yeah, if you're just almost always bending forward with one knee forward, and is your right knee, just if you're right-handed, and just flip this information, if you're left-handed, it'll be the other side, but the vast majority of the population of human beings is certainly right-handed, you know. But yeah, then the knee, similar to the elbow, just won't have full, natural, even extension, even on the right side as the left, if there's just been the fibers of the material of the pants around the knee worn apart from each other. There's just this baggier, looser gap and fitment between the knee, like the actual patella, the little kneecap bone, and the pants, right? If they just get worn to sit not snug against the knee anymore. On one side of the body, your dominant side, if you're right-handed, more than your non-dominant side, your left side of your body. So this is how clothing is right-handed in these ways. I mean, this is just happening where it is. And so this can happen in shoes too, you know, where, yeah, I mean, if you're just, you know, usually stepping forward with one foot more than the other, you might wear the material of your shoe more with that side than the other side. You know, I mean it. Just the same way, all the fibrous strands of the shoe will just wear apart more if there's more pressure being put against them. And so let's say you play a sport with like a ball, you know, and you kick the ball with your right foot most always, and you're wearing shoes, you're wearing the material of your shoe more on the right side than on the left side of your body, you know, on your left shoe. Now your right shoe being worn more, the actual strands of the fibers of the material just fits looser on your foot. And now your foot, which grips arches inward and brings all the bones together by the musculature just connecting to the bones and only pulling to grip arches in the feet to stabilize the entire body. Well, this will be different from left to right. If the right shoe is worn at the material, the right foot will not be able to grip as well, and it'll be wider, and now we're off to the right side of our bodies because the foot arch grips inward. Okay. Internal rotation from the shoulder to the foot. A video's title here under In the Image Clothing Company's main side. It's about this very same type of thing, right? The right side of the body just getting farther away from the center line. The right foot and the hip, a video under In the Image Clothing Company's main side here about the same thing. Just the position of the right foot underneath us, you know, determines everything else up the entire body because the foot's stabilizing the entire body. The feet need to be right underneath us to stabilize the entire body. We only have 2 feet. The video's title under In the Image Clothing Company's main side here about the same type of thing with the foot needing to be underneath us. Lifting the right side of the body. Another video's title here under In the Image Clothing Company's main side, because as the right side of the body lifts up, it comes in as well. All the way from the shoulder down to the foot, well, through the entire body, from the tip of the fingers, which is really the other end of the body from the toes, all the way down to the toes, right? When we lift our hand above our head, the fingertips are actually the farthest thing from the toes, not the tip of the head. It's mechanics. That's all the human body is mechanics. Just operations, just physical, measurable, mathematical degrees of motion. It's just what it is. And clothing is just what it is, and it doesn't exist until we make it as human beings, but human beings are almost always right-handed. And again, even left-handed, it'll just be an imbalance on the other side of your body, just if we're not centered. Either the left or the right will not be the same if it's not the same. And then it's just physically placed on us all the time, the clothing. The literal wording, that's what it means. We're clothing our bodies with something. This is what we do under In the Image Clothing Company. This is how we allow the body to work. It's just by understanding there's only one way that it can, so let's not restrict it by clothing it with things that don't work for the body. It just is what it is. So we understand this in such depth here, you know. Yeah, it just is what it is. So anyway, that's what I'm saying, you know, is if we wear the shoes material where you're kicking the ball with your right foot almost always and barely doing it with your left foot. You wear your right shoe. Your right foot doesn't sit snugly in your right shoe. Snugly, right? Doesn't sit tight in your right shoe. Well, yeah, snug is the right word. Snugly, though. It sounds funny to me. And then the right foot can't grip an arch to support the body, and the right side of the body just collapses. With our different length 5 toes that we roll evenly off the end of in the universal human design, you know, the pinky toe points straight forward. That's the neutral position. And the feet really, in a sense, kind of come in a little bit just because that's how the whole legs are shaped. Starting with the different length 5 toes and then up to the top of the leg bone where it comes up and into the hips. It's just this little outward curvature through the entire legs naturally with the body in its neutral position. There's a garbage truck making noise. I understand. But the point is, we just don't know this stuff. You know, you don't know that you've worn your shoes differently and that it's affecting your body to the tip of your head and the tips of your fingers if you just don't know. You know, you don't know that you've worn the right side of your top item of clothing and it's just causing your shoulders to sit differently left to right from the center line of your body at the spine where they connect, or the sternum where they connect, or the jaw where they connect. That's where the shoulders connect, is those locations, you know. And the center line of the body is the point for saying those locations. And you just don't know this if you don't know this. You don't know that you've worn your pants at the right knee more than the left knee so that your body's now going to just be imbalanced if you don't know this. You know, you don't know that you've worn the rear of your pants more on the right side of your sit bones or your glutes area, you know, your ischiums, the bottom of your pelvis, and your left if you don't know this. It's just, how could you know if you don't? Even through the noise of the garbage truck, we just document what we do here under In the Image Clothing Company in Date Market. It's the 29th of April, 2026. Today's date. How clothing is right-handed, it comes through all of these ways. And like I'm saying, these are unconditional things. Where, let's say we started with entirely centered clothing design, but we just wear the fibers of the clothing more on the right side than the left if we're right-hand dominant, okay? I get the noise, I understand. And so this can be in anything, you know, socks and undergarments and anything at all where we're just wearing the material. I mean, hats. Sure, there's a lot of noise around. It's just a public park. There's a woodpecker, though. You know, if you have a hat that you're wearing on your head, like I'm currently wearing a hat here, and every time you put your hat on, you use your right hand only, your hat might be off to the right, okay? Rather than using your left hand, your hat might be off to the left, and really ideally the hat's just as centered as we can have it be. But being right-handed, you might just about always be adjusting your hat or just putting your hat on to begin with your right hand. But we have musculature across our whole skull, across the whole scalp of the human being, between where the hair inserts to the skin and then the bones of the skull. The scalp has muscles. Look at my hat moves so much just by me moving the muscles of my skull. The ear muscles move, right? The ears actually move independently, just meaning independently of the rest of the head. You know, in this case is what I mean. The eyebrows, you know, the hat's sitting on all of this musculature, and if it's not sitting centered, then our bodies won't be able to be centered. And this would be clothing being right-handed in the form of a hat being put onto the head with the right hand only, let's say, and you never put it on with your left hand or you just put it on with the right hand the majority of the time over the left, you know. And really, just the point is, if the hat's off to the right at all, even putting it onto your head with your left hand, but you put it on and it's sitting onto the right side of your head more, this is clothing being being right-handed, you know. How clothing is right-handed? Well, there you go. In a hat, the jaw stabilizing the entire body. Not only does it have musculature connecting straight to the shoulder's edge, okay, like I'm saying, with the collars of the tops needing to stay centered and snug, you know. In the Image Clothing Company's dreaded collar seam modification, for example, you know, anything that's just discrepant or different in the collar of a top is just not centered. Well, we've got even opposing musculature from the center line of our neck. Our tops have to stay centered at the collars. Same for the dogs over on the Image Clothing Company poodles, or any animal that could possibly apply to, that we place something man-made onto the neck of, right? But there's also musculature of the jaw that goes up to the crown of the head, clear up to the top of the head area, like the crown, you know, of the head. There's musculature there coming down into the jaw that's allowing the jaw to work. Allowing the jaw to open and close so we can speak and eat, you know, and breathe, but also allowing the jaw to stabilize not only the head on top of the body, but the entire body through this musculature that's connecting the jaw to the head and the shoulders and the neck. You know, the hat is placed right on that musculature. The crown of the head is up here, above where the line of the hat will sit. And so we've got the band of the hat around the head, you know, and hat design varies, but if you're gonna have a hat stay on your head, it's going to have to be on your head enough to stay on your head, and it's going to sit around the sides of your head, right on the musculature. I'm contracting the musculature of my jaw. I don't know how well you can see it, but if you can, then you can also see it as well as me explaining it. Right, with me contracting my jaw musculature here, it goes all the way up to the crown of the head, on either side of the head. And so having a hat sitting right on that musculature and not evenly, you know, left to right, well, that's how clothing is right-handed, in the form of a hat, not sitting on the head centered, but just off to the right side. Let's say your jaw will be off to the right side. You will actually have an imbalance be worn into your jaw by having a hat sit on your head off to the right more than on the center of your head, you know. Truly, really. Now, as you're chewing, you wear your teeth down off to the right because there's just more activation in the musculature of the right side of your jaw that goes up to the crown of your head at that point. If there's just more pressure being put onto that jaw musculature with your hat off to the right side of your head, pressing against the right side's jaw musculature more than the left. So this is what I do. As the founder of In The Image Clothing Company, this is what we do. As our team builds, this is what it means to allow the body to work, is that there truly is only one way that it ever could. And this is where it comes. Patterning in the body is through little things like this you might not realize, but let's say you wear a hat just about every single day, just about all day, you can be deeply, 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 deeply ingraining a patterning into your entire body. Because now with that hat sitting imbalanced on the sides of your head with your jaw musculature traveling right underneath it, and the hat's pressing into that musculature of the jaw, your jaw will be imbalanced. And so now as you're speaking, you're moving your lower jawbone. That's what speaking is. You know how clothing affects speaking? A video's title under In The Image Clothing Company's main side. We have so many videos about the jaw under In The Image Clothing Company. As of today's date, the 29th of April, 2026, we have so many videos about, you know, eating and the hands and the feet, especially. These are some of the biggest focuses, you know, breathing, things like this under our clothing company. Yeah, because that's the reason we are a clothing company, is to allow the body to work. And, you know, having a hat sit on your head off to the right, as you're speaking now, your jaw will be off to the right like this. or off to the left, if you put your hat onto the left side more, just either side of your body that the head's not centered. You know, if the hat's sitting off to the right side more though, the right side of your jaw musculature will activate more than the left, and your jaw will just hinge, open and closed. Imbalanced. Okay, off to the right, if the imbalance is causing it to go off to the right. In this right-handed world, this is how clothing is right-handed. Okay, putting a hat on your head with your right hand and not putting it centered, but having it off to the right side more than just in the center, okay? And so it's things like this. It's really little things, but this is day after day after day. That's what patterning is. It takes time for patterning to get created. And that's the other thing with this, just to mention, just to be clear about, meaning that's another thing to say right here, is just what we talk about. It's permanent. There's no sales pitch to what we do under In The Image Clothing Company. But once we get out of chronic patterning that's been created in the body, it's impossible for it to come back unless you spend the amount of time doing the same things that you did initially to get the body into that depth of patterning. It takes, you know, weeks, months, years, decades for this patterning to get created. You know, just doing the same things day after day after day. But once you're aware of these things and start to be intentional about just keeping your body centered, and just in all the ways we discuss allowing the body to work under In The Image Clothing Company, clothing is just how we get to the body. It's just the only thing physically placed on the body. But we discuss everything with the body that we discuss. We discuss the entire body, you know, and all the ways we do. Just allowing the body to work. That's our focus under In The Image Clothing Company. You know, you just start putting a hat on your head centered, and then you start eating centered, right? Eating and drinking with the left hand, a video's title here under In The Image Clothing Company's main side, just because we live in a right-handed world. Well, that's what I'm saying, right? Just eating with your non-dominant hand, putting your hat on your head with your non-dominant hand, you know, just making sure your clothing is sitting on your body evenly, or else we've got right-handed clothing. And then we've got a right-handed imbalance in our bodies as well from its center line, okay? So yeah, glasses. This is what I mean, clothing. It's the literal wording of something placed onto something else. Glasses are clothing for the human being. Jewelry is clothing for the human being. So yeah, I mean, you've got one thing on one wrist and not on the other wrist, you're imbalanced. That's your clothing being right-handed if it's playing into a right-handed patterning by having something on only one wrist. Yeah. Anyway, but let's talk about glasses clearly. We could talk about all the jewelry and all the ways we possibly could, you know. That's clothing, your body. But, you know, we'll just give the amount of context we give in this video, fairly deeply, but I'll be doing this the rest of my entire lifetime as well, you know, so it just is what it is. There just is only one way the human body could ever work. And that's the truth, always, since God, the designer of it. You put glasses on your head, and let's say as you do, you're almost always, or always, right? Just about always, let's say, putting your glasses onto your face with just your right hand. Well, we've got a video here under In The Image Clothing Company's main side titled The Importance of Not Pushing or Pulling on the Ears. You know, another video titled The Importance of Even Ears under In The Image Clothing Company's main side here. The Importance of Even Nostrils. You know, the importance of even eyebrows, and a lot more of things like this, you know, the importance of the corners of the mouth, and there's a lot of small things like this in the body that play into patterning throughout the entire body, to the tips of the toes, the tips of the fingers, the tips of the head. If these little things are imbalanced, and these are coming from anywhere and everywhere in the body, they possibly could be as well, these imbalances, and traveling to these locations. But if you're putting glasses on your face just about every single day with only your right hand, or every day you're putting glasses on and it's just about only your right hand that you ever do it with, right? If you see what I'm saying. Well, gravity. It's just like a hat is sitting on your head with gravity. Well, glasses are sitting on our face and the tops of our ears, however they're sitting on you. They're sitting on your head, or on your eyes, or on your nose, or whatever it is, with gravity. Okay? And if the way you place your glasses on your head is with your right hand, It's the same thing as what we were talking about with the hat. You place a hat on your head with your right hand and it's imbalanced off to the right, your body gets into a right-handed patterning. You put glasses onto your face with your right hand, let's say they're just sitting slightly imbalanced on the right side of your head more than on the left side of your head. Really what I mean is on the right side of your head more than just centered. Well, your body will wear into a patterning, in a right-handed patterning. The same musculature that the hat's gonna be sitting against, this jaw musculature that goes up to the crown of the head, the glasses sit against. If we've got side pieces of glasses, those temple pieces, coming from, our eyes, down the sides of our head here, right above our ears, and then let's say the glasses sit on top of the ears, these side pieces, the temple pieces of the glasses, are sitting on this jaw musculature on the side of the head. So now again, every time you speak and just open your jaw or move your jaw, it's the musculature that's allowing that to happen. And some of that musculature is this muscle, that's coming up on either side of the head to the crown of the head. You've got glasses sitting directly against that. So now if your glasses are imbalanced at all, or let's say your feet are imbalanced at all, traveling up, your whole body's imbalanced because your feet are, then your glasses will be imbalanced, even if your glasses were centered. Okay, this is how clothing is right-handed in this case. Yeah, we talked about wearing shoes into an imbalance. Let's say your right shoe is fitting your foot looser than your left shoe because of any reason, but like kicking a ball with your right foot the majority of the time, you wear the fibers of your right shoe looser than your left shoe. Now your right foot not able to support your body as well as your left foot. Your whole right side of your body drops. Now even if you were to put glasses on centered, your head's still tilted off to the right from your foot up. And so now those glasses are still playing into deepening a right-handed patterning in your body. Same with a hat. It's coming from the foot up first, and then the hat's just only furthering the pattern if it is. This is how the body works. It only works how it does. God designed the body to work, and it just would. Within our own individualistic situations, it would just work unless or until altered. Just like the animals, It just is what it is. It's mechanics. I mean, this is just truth. It's measurable mathematical truth. There's no kind of claim. What we're doing here under In The Image Clothing Company, there's also no new information that we're trying to have or deliver. There's nothing we could take credit for with how the body works. It's God's design. But we just understand what's going on very, 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 and I could keep saying it, however many varies, deeply. We understand very deeply here under In The Image Clothing Company what's really happening with the body. We've got 530, 540 plus videos as of today's date, similar to this one, very thorough and full, packed full of detailed, explained well information like this, just about the anatomy of the human body and how to allow it to work. And I'll be doing this the rest of my entire lifetime, and our team will be doing this as well. I'm just saying, this is just what it is. These are unconditional things I'm still discussing. None of this stuff that I've discussed in this video so far has been any kind of imbalance in a design. These are things that is just because we are right-handed and our body's just a mechanical machine. If we place anything onto it, these things will be essentially placed onto our bodies right-handed, and it'll play into deepening a right-handed patterning in our bodies. And the information in this video goes the exact same for a left-handed person. Just flip it to the other side of your body with things that are universal, unconditional things from something that is centered, but we are approaching it with one hand or the other, or one side of our bodies or the other. Do you see what I mean? When it comes to imbalances in designs, when the designs of things are actually right-handed, that doesn't matter then if you're left-handed, you're still wearing right-handed clothing designs, the actual way it's put together. And we'll talk about this in here if we do, and to the degree that I do, actual imbalances in clothing design, rather than us causing things to be imbalanced that we're clothing our bodies with, or us causing our bodies to be imbalanced with clothing. If I said that the same way either way, then you get what I'm saying. If you do, there you go. But anyway, yeah, so hats, well, you've got two hands. You could choose one hand to put the hat on or the other hand if you've got two hands, but there's two sides to the body. The head's in the center, okay? Hat's gotta stay centered. Glasses have to stay centered, okay? Tops have to stay centered, pants have to stay centered, shoes, socks, undergarments, gloves. I mean, it's anything that could possibly be tied one side over the other. Don't have anything in the center line of the body, have one side over the other side. We need it even, okay? And on either side of the body, we need even opposing knots toward the center of the body. So, you know, otherwise clothing's imbalanced in a right-handed way through ropes, okay? If we tie a right-handed rope on the body, it'll put it off to the right side, okay? So, essentially right-handed knots on the left side, left-handed knots on the right side, because there's just two sides to the body. Now, there's a lot more to those kind of things that I could discuss, you know, just, I mean, the back of the shirt. Like I was saying, you sit down somewhere and you slide to the right a little bit. The bottom of your pants, like the rear of your pants that sits underneath you as you sit down, you'll wear the rear of your pants into a right-handed patterning, and then that'll just follow you through the rest of your time wearing those pants. That patterning will deeply ingrain into your body's workings, from your hips down to your feet and up to your head and out to your fingertips. The hips are the center of the body, top to bottom. Essentially, they're where we hinge, at least forward to back, where the spine comes down in and the legs come up into, right, the pelvis, the hip structure. But just the back of the shirt, you know, or the top design of clothing, whatever it is that's on our torso, around our rib cage, if you ever lean your back against something and then you slide to one side, and if you're right-handed and in a right-handed patterning is the point, you might just fall to your right side with gravity pulling you if you're not centered, and now you just wear the material of your clothing on your back, right? Your top item of clothing more on the right side. Now your rib cage expands and contracts imbalanced. The rib cage, it's bones that actually bend and move, right? Expansion in 360 degrees, just meaning all the way around, is how the rib bones open, caging the lungs to protect them so we can breathe in deeply if they're not altered. But if we wear a patterning into the rear of our top item of clothing that's on our rib cage by leaning against something and just sliding to one side and just wearing the fabric weave on one side of the body, on the right side of the rear of our rib cage of the top item of clothing, more than on the left side, then our rib cage will just expand and contract differently from left to right or from front to back, wherever we could possibly weave. Man, that's huge. Wherever we could possibly, you know, cause a imbalance in our clothing's tightness to its weave of the fibers making up our clothing. You know, the strands of fibers woven together. And that's what I'm saying is, yeah, I mean, it's impossible for the body to work within stretchy clothing. The rib cage expands upward in the front. That's actually how we get a full breath inward, because there's cartilage connecting the rib bones to the sternum in the front of the body that has a lot more motion than it could possibly have in the rear, where the rib bones connect into the spine. The ribs, well, also just connect to the spine in the rear, and that's our vertical support. On the front of the body, there's not a vertical support like that. At the bottom of the rib cage, we've got no bones at the bottom of the sternum here until we get down to the pelvis. So the ribs open in the front, upward. You know, there's a video here under In the Image Clothing Company's main site titled The Diaphragms of the Neck. And there's diaphragms that pull our rib cage up and back from the upper ribs, some of these upper ribs up into the neck, spine area, you know, the cervical spine area. Yeah, to get a full breath in. And so, like I was saying earlier, we wear the clothing item into a right-handed patterning on the rear of our bodies where that shoulder blade is, just as we're moving the shoulder blade. Well, that's not just the shoulder blade. The shoulder blade's sitting right on the outside of the rib cage. And so we wear the rear of our right clothing item that is the top, right back here. We wear this material, stretch it, no stretch ever in clothing, but we pull those fibers of the woven strands of material apart a little bit more on the rear of the top item of clothing, on our right rear rib cage area, and now we just breathe differently. You know, breath is the essence of human life. I get the airplane noise. Okay. In the Image Clothing Company's main side, 29th of April, 2026, down here in beautiful St. George, Utah, where we're based. What's the title? How Clothing is Right-Handed. Okay. Let me wait for the airplane noise for just a little bit. I'll keep discussing what I'm discussing here. This is huge information. It applies to you. You don't have to care about In the Image Clothing Company. You don't have to care about me, Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. But what we do here applies to you because you're a human being. Every body has one, or everyone has a body. Within this universal human design, even within our differences of that design, you know, where they are, if we're different slightly, there's only one way the human body could ever work. Baseline human being structure, we got to get as close as we can to it. So here's the thing, okay, what I'm saying is we wear the right rear of our clothing item more just by reaching forward with our right arm. Like I'm saying, we're just pulling on the rear of our top, back there where our rib cage has the clothing sitting against it. And so now as we breathe, yeah, the ribs will just expand more in a way that's just not even, because that's just how it'll happen. Because of the things I've said in this video, you know, there's just more room there. The clothing's just fitting looser back there, you know, and that'll put you into a right-handed patterning. It'll just drop your right shoulder, but your right shoulder will just be forward more and just more external. It's just the right-handed patterning, but it's just coming from your clothing. It's just not gonna sit on your body centered if we wear the clothing imbalanced. Clothing's just imbalanced at that point, and gravity's just sitting it onto our bodies, but it's just not gonna sit on our bodies centered if the clothing's not centered, and that's just how it is. So this clothing imbalanced in a right-handed patterning, I mean, that's how clothing is right-handed, through breathing, in one of the ways, all right? Yeah, we know what we're saying here under In the Image Clothing Company, all right? Now, yeah, I'm watching these men over here throw a football around. Imagine throwing something. Look at this position of me pulling all the fibers of my clothing item's top on the rear of my body on the right side, like right behind my right shoulder. The whole rear of the clothing item back there is being pulled on. So all those little fibers of the material of the top are just being worn away from each other, and it's just gonna stay like that. It's not gonna come back. After, you know, a degree of being worn away, it's not gonna come back to how it was. Not quite. Not quite. That's just how it is when we weave stuff together like that. Just over time, it gets worn out. That's how clothing is left-handed. One of the ways. Okay. I said left-handed that time, didn't I? Well, sure, if you're doing that on your left side, but that's how clothing is right-handed in this right-handed world. 85%, give or take at least, the human beings are right-handed. So, yeah, these are still all just things that are unconditional to design, because these are things that we're doing physical motion wise, wearing our clothing items. But there's so many things. Yeah, not only wearing our clothing items, but wearing looser the clothing items that we are wearing. Do you see what I mean? Wearing the material out. You could say you're wearing it in, but you're wearing it apart from itself. Okay. The weaves of the fabric. Okay. Strands of the fabric. Anyway, yeah. Okay. Anything and everything we could say. I mean, yeah, socks, you know, if you're right foot dominant as well, you know, if you're right-handed, you're probably right-footed, probably also, you know, and if not, then it's just the same thing on the other side of your body. You'd be left-footed in a left-handed patterning, but Yeah, if your right sock just fits looser than your left sock, well, your feet only grip arches inward, muscles only pull, so the toes come closer together, you know, in the feet as they activate to support the entire body, gripping those arches inward. So there you go. You know, you've got a looser right sock than a left sock, and you just got your entire right side of your body in a right-handed patterning because your sock's around your foot and your foot's stabilizing your entire body, and a loose sock isn't stable. Your foot's trying to hold the sock onto it rather than just working, having the sock just nice and snuggly. Wow. But yeah, that's how you'd say that, but it sounds funny to me. It's like Dante right now, my standard poodle here. He's snuggled up next to me. He's snugly laying there. That's what I think of when I hear snuggly, but yeah, you know, just nice and snug with the fit is how clothing needs to be. Clothing has to fit. I mean, it just does. For these reasons, you know, because muscles only pull in the body. You just got opposing muscles pulling. We pull to close, we pull to open. You know, we pull to close and we pull to open. We're always pulling. And as we wear muscle fibers, they're going apart from their nice pulled together original construction of the design. That's my point, right? It's not my point, but that's the truth. That's what we do under In The Image Clothing Company, is we allow the body to work. So there are a lot of designs though, and that's one of those things where we could talk about it today and next year they could be different, or we could talk about it, you know, I guess we will then. I guess we could talk about it. The point is, it doesn't matter. All the things that I've said in this video, pretty well all the things at least as far as I remember, are universal things. Meaning, you know, unconditional and universal to human being versus human being, to time period versus time period, to clothing design versus clothing design. Okay? But then there's a lot of things that are just imbalanced in design that we can say is a right-handed imbalance. You know, man, I don't know, maybe I won't talk about those things. Not that I'm like holding information back, but those are things that we talk about often. You know, when we give so many free modifications in clothing under In The Image Clothing Company to allow the body to work, the point is, if clothing is right-handed from its original design, we need to modify it to being centered. You know, In The Image Clothing Company's dreaded collar seam modification, yeah, anything that's not the same, like I was saying earlier, in the collar of a top, well, often where they'll put it is on the upper left side of the body, because that puts us into a right-handed patterning. There you go, that's how clothing is right-handed, and we discuss this often under In The Image Clothing Company, but it's the same position as just having clothing falling off to your right side, because anything, yeah, like that is like that. Yeah, I don't know, I mean, I don't know how much I'm going to say in this video necessarily about actual design that's right-handed, because that changes. And that's fine to discuss because we make specific videos about those things. But we do all that we can under In The Image Clothing Company here to just discuss things that are literally permanent and eternal and universal to everyone. Everybody who has one. Everyone who has a body. We're designed in the image of God. You know, you don't have to believe in Jesus Christ for him to be who he is. You know, I mean, you don't. And so the point is, you don't have to believe that clothing is right-handed for it to be right-handed, right? You see what I mean? What I'm saying is truth, and so we don't get to decide or change truth as human beings, and we try to do all that we can to align our lives and our focus and just what we do with truth under In The Image Clothing Company, you know, and just as disciples of Jesus Christ. And yeah, well, we've got another fourth of In The Image Clothing Company, In The Image Clothing Company podcast, and we have deep discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ. You don't have to be religious in the slightest or believe in anything, but you know, things are just what they are. You had to be here first to develop a belief on how you got here. It already had to happen, so your beliefs can't change how it did. You know, mine couldn't either, just to be clear. But yeah, We're on episode 204 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast as of today's date, the 29th of April, 2026. We just have deep insights on life because we're all the same thing. We're all human beings, the same thing, placed on the same earth, designed by the same God. We deal with different problems in the same ways, or the same problems in different ways, and that's just how it is. You know, we're all right-handed if we are, and if not, you're left-handed. Either way, clothing affects your body the same. For example, it's just one of the things in life, you know, clothing. It's just something we all wear if we do. Yeah. It connects us. Seriously. And what I'm really saying is, you know, I almost said who cares? That's how I feel with a lot of this stuff. I mean, spoken or unspoken, truth is just truth. So don't believe me. That's what I say. Like, don't believe in the Image Clothing Company, any of our team members, you know, any of our information. You know, me as the founder of In the Image Clothing Company, Evan Strong, I'm the one saying this because it doesn't matter if you believe things or not. If things are there, things are there, even if you don't believe it. And truth is truth. And the truth is, it's impossible to train the human being to get it to do anything. But if we're not allowing our bodies to work because we're wearing clothing that's right-handed, our bodies will be damaged. That's it. You know? So, there's many different things design-wise in clothing that could be imbalanced. But that's the thing is, you know, year after year they change, just clothing designs. And so the big focus is just understanding really this point. Clothing has to stay centered. That's it. If your clothing isn't fitting you as snug on the right side of your body as it's fitting you on the left side, you'll be imbalanced. You know, if your clothing is looser on your right side, you're in a right-handed patterning. In that moment, you know, if you're right-handed and you're actually like in a right-handed patterning just because what you personally do in life, you're using your right side more, but you put a clothing item on that's looser on your left side than your right side, that clothing item is putting you into a left-handed pattern in that moment, even if you're right-handed. That's just how it is because of gravity. I mean, clothing's just being pulled down on by gravity, and it's just taking our bodies with it. You know, when we discuss very clearly where clothing sits on the universal human design, just to not alter the body, I discuss how shoulders follow shoulder seams, you know, and the seams of the tops of our clothing, like up on top of our shoulders, they need to sit evenly just right behind the peak of the shoulders, because the shoulders will just follow where those seams are going with gravity, and the shoulders just connect to the body behind the head. That's where the motion comes from, and that's literally where the muscles connect to the bones of the body to connect the shoulder bones to the spine, and the skull is back behind the body. You know, so what I'm saying is anyway, that's what I'm saying. You know, clothing just follows gravity. The body follows clothing, you know, and gravity. So, anyway, I'll be doing this the rest of my entire life. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, whatever, whoever, who cares, right? Man, woman, tall, short, skinny, fat, any age, any part of the earth, any time period to ever be, you're just a human being. Clothing sits in the same location as everyone else. Pants need to be entirely above the hips, very slightly higher in the front than the rear, because we already bend forward at the hips. We hip hinge with an anterior rotation of the pelvis, the hips coming lower in the front and higher in the rear. So we don't want our pant waistline playing into the same pattern. There's a horizontal surface to the earth, that's the bottom of the feet, neutral from dorsiflexion, lifting up at the toes, or plantar flexion, pointing down at the toes. This is the term zero drop in any brand of shoe, just flat on the bottom. So our feet aren't altered. They're in their neutral position at that point, as if we're barefooted. Before any shoe design was ever able to be made by a human being, God made the human being's feet for us to then possibly design shoes to put onto. See what I mean? Truth is truth. No opinion to it. Just truth in general, ever. Anything that's ever true always is and always was. Truth doesn't change. It's not determined by me, that's for sure, or you, but Jesus Christ determines truth. Anyway, the point is, he is the truth, right? So, yeah, the way, the truth, and the life, Jesus Christ, right? A few of his many names. Perfect is who he is. Now, yeah, if we can keep our pants just very slightly higher in the front than the rear, then we do what we can to ensure that our pants don't fall lower in the front and just, you know, damage our bodies, because we already bend with our hips lower in the front. When we just do things with our hands in life in front of us and our eyes in front of us, the lever of our foot is off the front of the hinge of the ankle. You know, the hips just hinge forward anyway when we bend forward with a hip hinge. So, anyway, yeah. Okay. We bend side to side at the natural waist, which is above the hip bones, but below those lowest ribs, the same location that the elbows sit, just so that there's an area for the elbows to be there. The elbows naturally just rest at the natural waist. That's the neutral height for the elbow. The elbow is the bottom end of the upper arm bone, called the humerus, just as the shoulder is the top end of the upper arm bone, called the humerus. So anywhere the elbow goes, the shoulder goes, pivoting up an internal rotation or down an external rotation on this collarbone called clavicle, one of the three bones of the shoulder. From the top of the center line of the body here at the sternum, it comes up and out and becomes, yes, the shoulder, one of the three bones there. This other end of the collarbone out here at the shoulder is the peak of the shoulder that the top seams sit right behind, okay? Because we're just pivoting directly bone to bone on this collarbone, yeah, on either end of it. And so shoulders follow shoulder seams of clothing. Right-handed patternings, you know, if the clothing's right-handed, it's right-handed. That's all I'm saying about that for right now. We just discuss it where we do under In the Image Clothing Company. All the things that we do, and we get into it in depth. There's only one way the human body could ever work, and we know how it is, and you couldn't possibly dispute the truth of the basis of what we're discussing here. It just is what it is, man. So, anyway, you know, things like keeping short sleeves short, the importance of even short sleeves, right? Keeping sleeve cuffs off the wrists and pant cuffs off the ankles, short cuffs off the knee joint. These are just joints with motion, and the motion just needs to be able to be there, and it just can't if there's things in its way. Stuff that we just don't know if we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. You can't be held accountable for what you don't know. How could you be, you know? But that's why we just teach a lot of things like this, you know, that apply to you, whoever you are, under In the Image Clothing Company. Giving a lot of free information is a big part of what we are. We'll always have good clothing, you know, staying centered, fitting correct, being made in all the ways we can from 100% natural materials. Do everything clothing though, you know, minimal, brandless on the exterior, light, and just able to do everything that we do as human beings in. Same with the dog products over on In the Image Clothing Company. Poodles, you know, collars, leashes, harnesses, these type of things. They just need to sit centered on the dogs and light, minimal, to not restrict the dog's function of their bodily mechanical motion, okay? So, yeah, we do a lot here, man, under In the Image Clothing Company. And, yeah, shoes. You know, the top of the feet is half of the function, and that's In the Image Clothing Company's shoelace technique. Just the only way you can weave a rope across the top of the human feet without altering all the bones, ligaments, tendons, and muscles in there, gripping arches inward, keeping us vertical on Earth's gravity pull that's vertical as well, meshing with the center line of our bodies. You know, there you go. Removing all tags from clothing. It's one of those things that's happening at this time period. Tags just didn't even exist. Just labeling in clothing until decades ago from today's date, the 29th of April, 2026, because of all the reasons, and we discuss it. But yeah, we just can't have anything physically causing a gap in our clothing anywhere. Okay, and that's all I'm going to say on that for right now. The big point in this video is the things that I've discussed on how clothing is right-handed, you know, because it is. And really, pretty much all I said in this video about it is things that are just universally right-handed, you know, regardless of design. So, yeah, man. I mean, it's things like this, you know, you take your shirt off maybe with one hand always. You're always pulling it off just one-handed. That'll wear your shirt into a right-handed patterning if it's being pulled off in a right-handed way, you know, or into a left-handed patterning. I mean, it's things like this that we're actually wearing the fibers of the material. Yeah, right. And that's the point, is if you've been doing something like kicking a ball, playing a sport for a good amount of time with one foot more than the other foot, you might need to tie that shoelace on that side slightly tighter now than the other side, just have your shoes actually fit your feet the same amount of snugness, you know, because the material of the actual shoe, yeah, is worn differently. And I mean, clothing too, you know, if you've got a clothing item that's a top, and let's say the design is centered. Here's a bike making noise. Let's say that the design of your top item of clothing is centered, like this cotton t-shirt I'm wearing here. It's a really simple, basic, centered, nice design. That's awesome. That's what we're going for, to allow the body to work. You know, under In The Image Clothing Company, you know, that's the focus, is clothing like that. But if you wear your clothing to where you have the fibers of the actual material woven together on the right side be worn away, you might need to maybe, you know, wear the left side evenly to the right. I mean, because we're not really going to be able to shrink the clothing back to its original tightness of the weave on the right side if it's been worn into a right-handed patterning. And you don't want your clothing fitting any looser than properly, right? I mean, that's the point, is clothing needs to fit for the body to work, but clothing has to stay centered. I mean, that's huge. And so let's say you do wear your top into a right-handed patterning and you just got a wider right side to your top. If we were to measure from like the very center of the collar, if you will, where the center line of the body at the spine is going to be, out to the edge seam of the shoulder, and you measured the right side and it's just a little bit wider than the left side, maybe you do what you can to just try to evenly pull on the fibers of the left side of the clothing item to match the right side, to just keep the clothing item centered. Do you see what I mean? And these are things we can watch for. We've got a video under In The Image Clothing Company's main side here titled Where Pant Seams Sit. We discuss a lot with pant seams, you know, but the side seams of our pants just need to sit evenly right at the very sides of the crests of the hips, and the front and back seams of the pants just need to sit right at the very front and rear of the hips, you know, right in the center in the front and right in the center of the rear, because there's actually joining parts of the hips here in the front and then in the rear, you know, where the two sides of the crest of the hips come, and then the sacrum's in the center, and there's just independent motion on either side of the hips in the ways that there is. To the degree that there is, the rotation is really coming from the legs up into the hips on either side. But what I'm saying is, you know, if we wear our pants into a right-handed patterning, how clothing is right-handed in the sake of, you know, pants being worn, yeah, I mean, that's a huge thing. In the case of having pants being worn, like I was saying in this video, where the right glute area or sit bone ischium area, the rear of the pants on the right, is just worn out more in the material than the left side, maybe you do what you can to kind of wear the material on the left side to evenly match the right, because what'll happen is now that material, with it being worn away like that, it's got to go somewhere. And so what happens is the side seam of the pants on the right side will actually come forward in front of the right side of the hip, rather than sitting right at the very side of the crest of the hip, because the material on the rear just is moving, you know, wearing away, and it's just moving the whole side seam of the pants to a different location than right at the very sides of the hips. And it's yeah, so there you go. The point is just knowing where clothing sits, and we just discuss it very, very clearly here under In the Image Clothing Company. Just side seams in clothing need to be right at the very sides of our bodies. Top seams of tops just need to be evenly right behind the peak of our shoulders. You know, front and back seams of pants just need to be evenly right in the center of our bodies in the front and the center of our bodies in the rear. We've just got two sides to the body, left and right, and two sides to the body, front to back. We've essentially got quarters, you know, the seam down the center of the front of pants, and then we move off to the seam on the side of pants. That's a quarter. A seam in the center of the front of the pants, we move off to the seam on the side of the pants. That's a quarter. And then the seam in the very rear of the center of the pants, we move off to this left side. That's a quarter. And the seam in the very center of the rear of the pants, we move off to the right side. That's a quarter. You know, a fourth is what I mean by quarter. A fourth of the whole of the entire circumference of the body. This is the same if we were to have seams, you know, on our tops, just meaning there's a center in the front, there's a center in the rear, there's a center front to back on either side. And right-handed clothing is just going to move, you know, forward on the right side and off to the right side. It's just gonna wrap around the right side of the body. It's just how it is. That's what it means. That's what it means. That's what it is. That's like the baseline explanation for this video's title on the 29th of April 2026 under In the Image Clothing Company's main site here in beautiful sunny St. George, Utah. Seriously, that's the I love it. I love it. I love that I'm doing this right now. It's awesome. That's the point, is, you know, how clothing is right-handed, which is this video's title. Well, the big, you know, takeaway and wrap-up information is no matter what we could possibly discuss is playing into a right-handed patterning in clothing, what's happening and what a right-handed patterning essentially will always be and becomes, you know, even if it's just through wearing the material, through just using our clothing by clothing our bodies with it. What's happening really is the seams on the right side of the body are coming forward and wrapping around the body, and the seams that are right in the rear of the center of the body are coming off to the right side of the body. The whole body is just moving off to the right side and forward. We reach forward with our arms, or we reach forward with our legs, and well, maybe you jump off your left leg if you're right-handed, you know, your right side's going forward, right? It's the same kind of thing. You're twisting everything forward on the right side and to the right side when it comes to clothing. It's just a rotation forward and, you know, around the body in a way that's counterclockwise, you know, like looking down at our feet, because the rear of the body comes around to the right side to the front of the body, and the front would essentially go around to the left side to the rear of the body. In a right-handed patterning, we're twisting the body counterclockwise. You know, you can turn left easier if you're right-handed. You know, you can look right easier, but you can turn your body left easier, because looking right with your head pivoting and turning your entire body left is actually the same thing mechanically. We've discussed this in certain specific videos about that specifically, you know, under In the Image Clothing Company's main site. Months and months and months ago, right? Anyway, that's the point, is clothing is right-handed. If you are, even if the clothing started centered. If you wear the clothing by being right-handed, well, that's how clothing is right-handed. But then if we've got any designs that are just right-handed to begin with, well, then that's just something we can do modifications to get the clothing centered in all the ways that we can, to the best degree that we can. And so there's your takeaways, you know, that's the big point. There you go. All right. In the Image Clothing Company music, another one of our fours, a lot of what we do is show the sizing and setup of guitar to not alter things like the rounding to our hands. They correlate with the arches in our feet, right? And one will affect the other, or the other will affect the first one, whichever one you start with, the hands to the feet, if we alter them, you know. The gripped arches in the feet and just the natural rounding to the open palm, right? The open palm and internal rotation video's title under In The Image Clothing Company's main side. Yeah, the hands work round, the feet work round, the feet grip textured earth, not flat man-made flooring. Okay, the goal is natural on all four sides of In The Image Clothing Company. And yeah, rhythm and poetry, spoken word, lyricism, music, singing, guitar playing, geared around the gospel of Jesus Christ with the messages over on In The Image Clothing Company music. That's a lot of what we do there. But yeah, the sizing and setup of guitar as well, just so we don't alter the body. The neutral wrist, straight out from the outside of the forearm, down and out that pinky finger, that's the neutral to the wrist, just so the fingers track in line. Yeah, right, we do what we do here, and that's what we do here, is allow the body to work through all the ways that we do it. But there's a lot more that we do as well. It's just that if you're going to do anything, you have to have your body working as well as you can personally have yours working to be able to do things as well as you can physically do things in life, you know, or even cognitively, you know, intellectually. Your body is just a physical thing, right? The physical body of the human being. Anyway, it's just a mechanical machine, and so there's never anything placed onto it until we do it, you know, until we design clothing as human beings. Clothing's just gotta fit. It has to. It has to. And, you know, just to be very clear, I'm speaking out of personal experience. As the founder of In The Image Clothing Company, me, Evan Strong, I'll be leading this my entire lifetime, but until I was about 24 years old, I was making just about all the same mistakes, if you will, and I was just ignorant to just about all the things that we discuss being intentional about under In The Image Clothing Company, you know. So I was doing just about all the same things we shouldn't do if we're going to allow our bodies to work. And that's actually really how I have the depth of understanding that I do. You know, experience gives you an understanding in a different way than you can get through just about any other way. And so, anyway, see what we're doing here, because we've got a lot of beautiful things going on, and only to progress with what we're doing. We've only been down here in St. George, Utah, where we'll be based for life for about 6 days as of today. Oh, 5 days? Anyway, however many days it's been exactly. We got here Friday last week. Today's currently Wednesday. It's the 29th of April, 2026, like I've said quite a few times in this video. But just, you know, keeping records, just documenting what's going on. It's a beautiful thing to do. Beautiful thing to do. A record-keeping people is what we are as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And also, yeah, it's just kind of our insurance policy in the ways that it is too, you know. But just also the free information. This is all you'd ever really need to know about clothing being right-handed to know, you know, when it comes to things that just get worn into clothing through us wearing the clothing, you know, patterning-wise. Because you can take this information and just apply it to any item of clothing you could wear, or anything you could call clothing that maybe wouldn't have seemed like clothing to begin with, but just with this understanding of the only thing physically placed on the body. I mean, it's just about the body, you know. Getting into a right-handed patterning in the body is one thing in itself, but that patterning will be held in the body if our clothing also was in a right-handed patterning, but then our bodies will just be able to get into a right-handed patterning if clothing's in a right-handed patterning. Like, let's say you wear some used clothing from somebody else who was right-handed, and it's been worn into a right-handed patterning, but your body's fairly centered. Well, this clothing that you've purchased used that's been worn into a right-handed patterning can put your body into a patterning, even if you continue to live your life approaching it centered, you know, ambidextrous, if you will, using both sides of the body. That's what it means to be ambidextrous. There's a video under In The Image Clothing Company's main site here titled "You Can't Be Ambidextrous in Imbalanced Clothing." And that's exactly what this video's title is about. That's what we're explaining here, is how clothing is right-handed. That's the video's title. So, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. So, here's a dog. And it goes potty. You notice how good of a dog Dante is? I mean, you might not even be able to see him, but he's right here. This is his slip lead, and he's connected to it right here. He didn't even move much at all, if at all. You know, over on In the Image Clothing Company Poodles, we discuss how to be a good owner of dogs and what that actually means, right? And there's just a lot that we are doing. So don't get it twisted, you know, don't think we're just a clothing company and not understand what we're really doing here. I don't think you have to care about us as a company for our information to change your life, because it's not our information, right? Just the information we understand and we just discuss. It just is what it is, all right? And clothing just is right-handed if you are, unless you're extremely intentional, but you just don't know how to be unless you do. So that's where we come in under In the Image Clothing Company. Really is just giving the understandings of what's going on, because there's a lot going on that we just don't know until we do. Even if we're personally experiencing it day in and day out, we just don't know things if we don't, you know? Man, so anyway, that's a lot of ways and reasons that clothing is right-handed or can become right-handed or can even put you into a right-handed patterning. And we can take that information and just, like I'm saying, apply it to anything we could possibly discuss as being clothing in any way. So a big thing that we focus on as well is just, you know, in daily life, fingernails and toenails, just to back and support the fingers and toes. That's why they're there. Just natural God-given strength for the fingers and the toes. You know, cut relatively flat on the tips and all the way to the tips to back and support those fingers and toes, to grip arches in the feet, and to just have this nice rounding open palm. Otherwise, your body's damaged. If your fingernails or toenails are cut too short, that's just it. So anyway, it's good. Good stuff. Dante's a good dog. Here he is. Oh, good. So good. Yes, a good one. Oh, he's a good dog. Oh, sorry. I'm trying to pull him closer to me, and the slip lead was wrapped around his back legs. Good doggy. Good. Anyway, how clothing is right-handed. Well, sorry, brother. Just elbowed him in the head a little bit. Yeah, there's a lot to it. Okay. And I mean, let's say you put a bag over your shoulder. You know, you pull on your clothing items material on that shoulder. And now just because you had a bag on your shoulder, you wore your clothing that you placed the bag on top of, you know, between your shoulder and the bag, there's a top item of clothing, and you wear that into a patterning. It didn't really have anything to do with the clothing. It was just because you put a bag over your shoulder, and the clothing just happened to be between your shoulder and the bag. I mean, this is really what it is, you know, when it comes to why the body isn't working. It's these things. Truthfully, honestly, permanently, immediately, and constantly, because it's the only thing physically placed on us, clothing. No amount of workouts, you know, are ever going to possibly get your body to work if you're wearing imbalanced clothing. If your clothing's right-handed, you know, in any way that we could discuss how clothing is right-handed, yeah, you're never going to overcome your right-handed clothing fitment on your body by trying to work your body out or exercise your body. See what I mean? No, it's impossible. Physically impossible. So clothing has to fit, and then the body can just work. That's it. That's it. Within our own individualistic situations, and we discuss it deeply, but that's it, man. I mean, that is it. That's it. So, right-handed clothing, okay? Watch out for it. I mean, yeah, you just got a sleeve sitting on your right forearm more than your left, you know? That's why I say it. The importance of short sleeves being even, right? The importance of even short sleeves. Yeah, you just have to have full motion in either arm. Clothing's right-handed if your right short sleeve is sitting on your forearm, okay? Like down on your elbow joint. Okay. Same with the, oh, sorry, Dante. Same with the right hand. I mean, same with the long sleeve on the right hand. Well, yeah, that's the right hand. Yeah, you know, you just have short sleeves that are not evenly above your elbow joints. Well, there you go, imbalanced. You've got long sleeves that are just not evenly above your wrists. Well, there you go, imbalanced. And that's the thing, is you're just reaching with your right arm, you wear your right side's clothing material a little bit longer with the fitment at the sleeves now on the right side than the left. That's how clothing is right-handed. And it's just not a joke, because then it travels through the rest of your entire body. When I say it's not a joke, I just mean it's extremely huge with the impact of the patterning that travels through your entire body at that point. From something that's just slightly different. So, it's just what it is, man. All right. All right. Just as I say, or and if I do, you know, when it's the case, there's a lot more that I could discuss in this video, you know, right now as I'm making it than I have, but it's just about context. It's about giving an understanding that you can just apply to other things as well. You know, the same kind of approach to just understanding that clothing can be worn into a right-handed patterning. And anything you do in your life, I mean, just sit down centered, stand up centered, reach forward centered. You know, it's about your body, but then the clothing can get worn into an imbalance as well if we're just not doing these things centered. You know, man, I mean, it's just so simple, because sure, there's so many different ways we could possibly have imbalances be designed into clothing, but if we just never had anything besides centered clothing designs as human beings, we could still have terribly imbalanced right-handed patterning worn into clothing. And if you just don't know what to look for, you just don't know what to look for. That's the thing, you know? Just that things need to be even. They just have to be. They just have to be even, because we just have even motion. You reach your arm forward, or you reach your arm back, and there's just even motion. You rotate your arm in, or you rotate your arm out, and there's just even motion. You lift your arm up, or you lift your arm down, and there's just even motion. This is everything in the body. The arm's just an example. And so if the clothing is just not sitting centered, and we have worn our clothing into a right-handed clothing pattern, our bodies are in a right-handed pattern as well at that point. It's that real, it's that literal, it's that legitimate, as in, it's not something you can choose to want to care about. You have to care about having an intentionality. Well, I guess you don't have to care, but you have to have an intentionality to have your clothing fit your body. Every human being to ever live on any end of time, if you will, it's always the exact same, the way the body functions. So no matter what clothing is, let's word it like that, right? Ever. It's just got to let the body work. That's it. It's like, it's huge, you know? Allowing the body to work, it's the only option. The only option is to allow God's design of the human being to continue to work. We're not going to get it to do anything. We're not going to change its functioning unless we change the shape and length of the bones. And so the reasons why it just doesn't work so well anymore after some time is because of patterning. And this right-handedness is the big deal, because we're right-handed. Well, maybe you specifically are left-handed, but cool. You live in a right-handed world. Vastly, the majority of the world is right-handed. You know, so yeah, we've got videos here under In the Image Clothing Company, our main site here, specifically discussing right-handedness. You know, because you're right-handed is the video's title. And yeah, here under In the Image Clothing Company's main site, I discussed that there's a lot of things I know about you personally, just if I know that you're right-handed, without ever having met you. Because unless you're just about, you know, as intentional as you can be to stay centered, you're in a right-handed patterning to a degree if you're right-handed. You have to be. You know, unless we're using the left side of our body exactly half of the time and the right side of our body exactly half the time. If we use the right side of our body 51% of the time and the left side of our bodies 49% of the time, we're in a right-handed patterning. That's just how it is. We are in patterning to some degree or another as a human being. It would be impossible for us, just because we're imperfect, to become completely, entirely centered. But the goal is to get centered. The goal is to stay centered and to never have gotten into patterning to begin with, you know. But the right-handedness is a big deal. In all the ways we could discuss patterning being able to be created in the body, well, how is it? It's because there's two sides and one's being used differently than the other. We're just right-handed, if we are. But if you're left-handed, then you're in a left-handed patterning. If you are, it's just one side versus the other of the body is the point. You know. So, yeah, the longer you wear a specific item of clothing, the more it can become right-handed. You see what I mean? I mean, some people, you know, and then depending on the time of your life, maybe you're like this at some times of your life and not so much like this at other times. Some people wear the same item of clothing or the same few items of clothing day after day for like months or years. And there's other people that just, you know, are wearing different clothing all the time. People that are into fashion, for example, a lot of times they're wearing a lot of different items of clothing. And so the clothing doesn't have that long of time that you're wearing it to even get ingrained into a patterning. But if you have like a coat or a sweatshirt or something, you know, a jacket, a hoodie type thing that you just take out when it's cold and wear year after year after year, that item of clothing might be worn into a very, very, very deeply ingrained right-handed patterning. That's what I was saying, how you might buy a used item of clothing and it's in a right-handed patterning that then puts your body into a right-handed patterning. That's what I mean. That's really what I'm saying here. You see what I'm saying here? Meaning now you can. I'm really glad that I said that the way that I did. A lot of it's just about the time, the longevity. That's how patterning gets created, you know? You do something just with one hand for like 5 minutes, let's say, and you're not going to build up patterning probably. But you do the same thing day after day after day after day, and over time you'll build up patterning. That's what patterning is it's a, you know, a repetitious thing, a length of time or just the amount of times doing something. So this is clothing being right-handed, right? How clothing is right-handed? Well, over time, that's how. By being right-handed and wearing the same item of clothing, if you're doing anything to wear it into a right-handed patterning more than just staying centered, then it'll probably just only get deeper into a right-handed ingrained patterning over time, and that's just it. That's just it. You know? That's it. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, and thank you. I mean, this is one of the biggest videos we've ever had so far under In the Image Clothing Company. It is, because I mean, I've discussed this certainly many, many different times where I certainly have, yes. But, I mean, this is the point. Is staying centered. Because of Earth's gravity. Because of immovable by themselves bones of the body. And it's not even a question of the body by itself anymore once we put clothing on. Now the clothing has its own ability to have its own imbalances.